Howdy, we're back with another TV season review, and today we're reviewing Daredevil, Born Again. Now, a little bit of preamble before we get into the review. This is kinda a soft reboot / season 4 of the original Daredevil series that was airing on Netflix that took place in the MCU. This is the first time Disney has truly gotten their hands on the Daredevil character, and in all honesty, much like majority of the projects we've gotten since the end of Phase 3, a lot of Daredevil is really hit or miss. But unlike the other Disney Plus shows outside of probably WandaVision, the hits here are some of its biggest hits that they've ever struck. And I'm not kidding. Out of all the Disney Plus shows that we've gotten up until this moment, this is absolutely the best. However, being the best doesn't mean that this doesn't come with its flaws, and that doesn't also mean this show is that great. Disney Plus MCU shows, in my opinion, are all at best 5 out of 10s. The hits are cool, but the misses and overall boring pacing and storytelling that a lot of those shows have just kind of take me out of it. A bunch of those shows I've forgotten as soon as they've ended, and I've had no interest to rewatch. Whereas I compare it to some other comic TV shows out there currently, like The Boys, Penguin, and hell, even some of the older Netflix Marvel shows that Disney now owns the right to, like season 1 of Jessica Jones, 1 and 3 of Daredevil, 1 of Punisher, and bits and pieces of Luke Cage, are honestly better than this show. However, like I said, that doesn't mean that this show doesn't have its highs. The biggest pros of this series, in my opinion, is just honestly the return of Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. Their performances are a welcome return, but I will highlight Charlie Cox in particular. He is having so much fun during this show. He is the epitome of Daredevil now, in my opinion. Obviously, he's been playing the character in totality for 10 years, but all in all for maybe like 6 out of those 10, and he's amazing every time. And here he is going through another internal battle, not necessarily the one of, morality and religion, but more so battling his inner violent demon, at least Midtown's protector as Daredevil, but he doesn't like what it brings out of him, especially considering how much his life has changed, or at least what happened during the time skip that is revealed. Foggy was assassinated by a returning Bullseye, and that kind of caused Matt to collapse internally and retire the Daredevil mantra and just be a full-time lawyer. He has a new, lawyer organization, new team. Karen and Foggy are no longer in the show, as well as, other characters like Brett Mahoney that just don't return in the show, which I'm fine with. I wasn't the biggest fan of Daredevil supporting characters as much as like the overall Netflix fan base were. Like Foggy was okay, Karen was okay, but I felt like at least when it came to them being his human counterparts as he is dealing with his vigilante stuff was just getting kind of repetitive and annoying by the time we got to this show. So I wasn't really mad that they took those characters out. It was just the context in which it happened, as well as the production quality of that scene is just not my particular cup of tea. In fact, I'll just admit this right now. As much as I enjoyed those shows on Netflix, I'm not gonna sit here and act like they're perfect or were honestly even that conceptually stimulating. It's just more so the quality of writing and acting, and honestly the way that those shows were shot fits the particular tone I feel like those shows were going for. Here, when we get to the more violent aspects of it, or even just Daredevil in action, there's clear CGI and After Effects that are used that just don't really look that good. It isn't until we get to the last 2 episodes I feel like the cinematography and the way the animation as well as the gore and violence is handled is done not only in a more tasteful way considering it's darker, but also in a much more stylistic way that even the Netflix shows never really tapped into. All in all, however, the tonality and general essence of this show for some reason gives me more of a cheap production quality vibe, even more so in line with stuff like Iron Fist and the Defenders, as opposed to something like Daredevil season 3 or even Jessica Jones season 1. There isn't really that much use of color or stylistic imagery at all, outside of Matt having like this new hearing vision, which is kind of cool and funny at times, or Bullseye having these weird visual moments when he gets into his bag. I thought was actually pretty cool, and I wish the show utilized that more, especially considering there's a clear comic influence from from that. And I must say, as a superhero show, it isn't afraid to be a superhero show, much like its predecessor. Daredevil season 1 really doesn't feature Daredevil in his costume at all, even though I prefer that masked vigilante costume. It just looks badass. Daredevil doesn't get his suit up until the penultimate episode of that season, and by the time we get there, we're just kind of like, I kind of like that original suit better. Like, it's cool to see him in the comic accurate suit, but you guys waited a little too long for that. So yes, like I said, the show itself isn't afraid to show Daredevil off, especially even in light. It's just that I'm not a particular fan of it. I think his costume is good, but I am not a fan of Bullseye's costume, White Tiger, Muse, or any of the other vigilantes outside of Punishers, which I think looks pretty good. I also think that there's this walkway scene with White Tiger, and even though the outcome is insane and has a bunch of implications for the rest of the season, it just doesn't look that good. We could have had a scene of that character engaging in a battle and then getting ambushed in some way, but you know, instead it just felt like this was like tacked on at the last minute. I do feel like the show does have a much more grounded aesthetic approach than the rest of the Disney Plus shows, which in some cases does work to its advantage, but in others it just feels amateurish. The entire side plot of Ben Ulrich's niece being like updated modern journalist, vlogging and interviewing people on the street just felt like a waste of time to me, especially considering that doesn't really carry over into all of the episodes. It just happens in a couple. And then we get down to it. Honestly, the storylines and dialogue in the show are just way more simplistic than even the lamest of Disney Plus Marvel shows. Like, you know, stuff like Moon Knight or even She-Hulk, which both I wasn't necessarily the biggest fans of. I just didn't really hate those shows. Has much more consistent and better storytelling practices, honestly, than majority of the show. It isn't until the last 3 episodes it really feels like there's a huge overarching story and a bunch of connective tissue between those episodes. Like I said, the bank job episode and pretty much everything from 3 to 6 just feels like a honest to God waste of time, in my opinion. There are things that do build a story laced within those episodes, but nothing that really feels good or necessarily has weight to it, in my opinion. Finally, I just gotta say it, as much as I enjoy episode 1, that entire intro sequence is just shot so poorly. The parts in the bar are fine, but everything relating to the Bullseye assassinating Foggy and Foggy being on the street, and you know, I'm cool with the fight scene. I thought the fight scene was fine, but honestly, Daredevil getting to, you know, the fire escape looked really bad, and just the way Bullseye was walking down the street looks really bad. The entire part of Foggy, you know, bleeding out looks really bad. Everything just was like, And finally, the connections to the grander MCU are not good. They feel shoehorned in. I am not into it at all. The Miss Marvel cameo character Easter egg was so shoehorned in. It did not help the bank episode at all, in my opinion. In fact, it helped to make it worse. All in all, I'm glad Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, as well as John Bernthal and Deborah Ann Wolfe and a couple other actors have returned from the original show. It's not a complete reboot. I do also appreciate the fact that there were some changes. I was kind of tired of the dynamic between Foggy and Matt and Karen. I was kind of over it, so I embrace the aspects of the show that they've changed overall. However, the things that I don't like are such a huge chunk of this show. This still kind of causes it to fall in line with the rest of the Disney Plus shows that Marvel has released up until this point. It's ahead of the pack, sure, but it's like comparing shit to a booger, in my opinion. Like, sure, it's better than shit, but it's still a booger. Is it the worst season of Daredevil? I think it is. As much as I'm not a big fan of season 2, all in all has much higher highs than this show. I feel like it's just that season 2 was kind of boring, in my opinion, in some areas, like with the hand and stuff like that. Here, though, you know, the fact that it's a shorter season gives it an advantage, but even then, I don't think season 2 ever really has any bad episodes, just episodes I don't love. Whereas here, like I said, episodes 4, 5, and 6 I really genuinely don't like. What did you guys think of Daredevil Born Again? Do you feel better about it than I do? What would you guys rate it? Or do you agree with me? Do you feel like it was just kind of alright? Or do you even disagree with me on that end and feel like it was awful? Do you feel like it's one of the worst shows? So yeah, ahead of the pack, but not that great. And I will see y'all in the next video. Bye bye.